I see you're back here after the pandemic. Yay, is all I can say. During the pandemic, before it started, I was in Saskatchewan talking to over 700 Indigenous people. They came down from all the Indigenous communities, and we got the word the pandemic happened, and we didn't know if the provinces were going to shut their gates, not let us through or whatever, so we got it through fast, adjourned, and headed back to Manitoba. And you know, seeing everybody get back into church routine, I don't think our routine will ever be the same again. And I have to tell you, today we're talking about human trafficking, and it is something that increased during the pandemic. So we're going to talk to you about that. It's been a while since I've been here because of the pandemic, and it's just so wonderful to be here. I thank you for your prayers, and I thank you for the growth that has happened in terms of people's knowledge about human trafficking. But you know, you have a hero amongst yourselves here too. You have colleagues here. You stand up, give him a hand, everybody. This man, come on up here. Now, he drove all the way out to Winnipeg to our offices last week to see me, and his heart was for the children here in Brandon, and so please pray that we'll be able to get into every single school this year to talk about how to stop human trafficking with our children here right in Brandon and surrounding areas. Can you do that? And Kalegas shared with me his book, Trail to Desperation. And it's about human trafficking in Nigeria. But when you read it, and I did read it, it's exactly like what happens here. But you know, he was telling me that when he came to Canada, he walked through the Canadian borders, and the first thing he heard about was the laws against human trafficking. And my name, Joy Smith, which was funny because, I mean, he just arrived from Nigeria. And look at him. We are blessed to have him right here in the province of Manitoba. We are blessed to have him working on the human trafficking issue. And I was so honored to have him show up at my office and share his heart with us. So pray for that. We want to get into every single school. And so we have a great leader here. If I was living in Brandon, I'd vote for you as trustee. Wouldn't you? Thank you, Kalegas. Thank you. Give him a hand. I mean, he's amazing. He and his wife. Both of them are just amazing. You know, it's been a while since I've seen you. And you know, when I saw you last time, we were developing the Joy Smith Foundation. And you know what? It's not about Joy Smith. I didn't even want it named that. It was the board who named it. And my former chief of staff, Joel Osterman, who insisted, because I passed the laws, that it be named. People would recognize it. I didn't think that was right, but I was wrong. They were right and I was wrong, if you know what I mean. And you know what I've seen, and there's something I want to address today that is so important. What surprised me is in our churches all across this country, we have worked over 7,000 files. Now you multiply that by families, and it's well over around 30,000 people that we've touched personally, one-to-one, through the foundation. But you know, God has been so good to us, so we've been able to spread all across the country. But the shocking thing this last 3 to 4 years has been most of our cases have come from the Christian community. So we spent $40,000 that we earned. By the way, I get no money from the foundation. I volunteer every single day of my life. So if anybody thinks I'm padding my wallet, that would be wrong. The fact of the matter is we spent $40,000 on a Bible study. It's called The Christian Response to Human Trafficking. And after we speak today, you can go to the back and take a copy for free. The thing of it is, we want all our Christians, brothers and sisters, parents and grandparents, to understand what human trafficking is. And when I went to my own church at a Bible study and was going to introduce the Christian response to human trafficking, I had one of our members of our congregation say, oh, no, 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 I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. This will never happen to my family. I said to her, well, you know what? I'll be the first person you call when it does if you don't know about human trafficking, because you want to prevent this from happening to your children. And everything we produce is done with grace. Any family can watch anything we produce. But what's so unique about this Bible study, it's about our church and our real people. The victim grew up in a Christian home. The John is the one who services himself or herself sexually, grew up in a Christian home. The trafficker grew up in a Christian home. So based on the biblical principles that we all live by, we designed this Bible study, and it's yours today. Just please pick it up and sit down with your families and watch it, because you'll have a lot of Bible verses that go along with that you can build within your own church, your own Bible study. But you know, when over 93% of our cases come from our Christian community, we were forced to produce that. We had to. And so every church we go to all across this country, and we do go from coast to coast to coast, we talk about that Bible study and we give it out for free, and we will continue to do that. And if anybody is sitting in this congregation thinking it would never happen to your children, it would never happen to your grandchildren, that is nothing but naive. And so when you think about the biblical call that we have on our lives, you know, what happens to these traffic victims is often they are the ones that are so oppressed, they get lured, and the traffickers come on as their friends. But in the end, it doesn't happen that way at all. They come on as their friends, but after a while, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Because I'm going to tell you how the traffickers work, and I'm going to go through the slides rather quickly, because human trafficking happens every day. And when that happens in a family, families don't talk about it, particularly in Christian circles. Or if you happen to have a station in life, like you own a business, or people know you, or you're a teacher, or you're a pastor, they don't talk about it because they have a lot of the blame and shame on them. And that's wrong. That's how the traffickers get away with it. Don't talk about it. The traffickers, you know, they operate in secret, and they're all over the place. You know, in Galatians 6:2, it's one of my favorite verses, carry each other's burdens, and in the way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Carry each other's burdens. So today, in this wonderful congregation, all of us have burdens. You and I, everybody has burdens, but Christ carries them. And before I carry on, I just want to know, if you receive Christ as your personal Savior, you are very powerful people. And not everybody who goes to church has a personal relationship with the Lord. They go to church for different reasons. But the fact of the matter is, when you actually come to know the Lord, accept Christ, accept that He died on the cross for us, and He gave us this wonderful, wonderful gift. Each one of you that have done that have the Holy Spirit. And you know, it doesn't matter, like I've often said to many of the traffickers that I've worked with, and the victims blame themselves, it's all their fault. I say to them, no, it's not. Christ took that burden Himself. And you know, when you receive Christ, then the Holy Spirit gets you through everything. Now, since I've seen you last, there's been a lot happen in our foundation. We've worked from coast to coast. We've worked many files that we have personally. You know, we've reached thousands of people. But that's only the grace of God. Now, I have to tell you, when the pandemic struck, I thought, oh no, now we can't travel. Now we can't do all the help of all these people. But I was wrong, because my daughter Janet, who, walked with me side by side for a very long time. I was in Parliament for 12 years. I passed 2 laws that made Canadian history. Bill 268, mandatory minimums for traffickers of children 18 years and under, and Bill C-310 that reaches the long arm of the Canadian law when permanent residents of Canada or citizens of Canada go abroad. We can now bring them back to Canada to bring them to justice. But that wasn't me. Nobody can do that. I am a sinner saved by grace, period. And I have to say to you, when God calls you, you get right with God, you refresh your life. God calls you to do what you're supposed to be doing, whether it's farming, I love farming, whether it's being a nurse, whether it's being a doctor, whether it's whatever, whether it's being a pastor of a church, but the calling is on your heart, so you can't say no. And that's why when I left Parliament, I started the Joy Smith Foundation. Fact of the matter was, after the pandemic, it was extremely difficult because my heart was breaking. I thought, we're done. We have to just stop now. But Janet, who was senior vice president of a huge company, she took care of Canada and the United States. And all of a sudden she came and she said, Mom, I'm tired of making rich men and rich women richer. God hasn't called me to do that. She said, I want to just help you on the foundation, and we've got to get this under control. And what I didn't know is she knew how to set everything up virtually. She knew how to build everything. And so the gifting she has is for business, and her heart is with this issue. So she combined them both of them. And she now is CEO of our foundation. Isn't that lovely? And nothing stopped her. She got a very severe cancer after that. That didn't stop her. She just kept on focused. And when she spoke at our church about her journey through cancer, I can tell you, it broke my heart because it was stage 3C. And if anybody has ever been brushed with cancer, it's very advanced cancer. She laid in her bed and had the laptop computer, and she said it helped her because she was so sure that God would see her through it. And one day when I dropped her off from chemo, she went into her house, and her son Matthew was there, and he said, oh, Mom, can I get you a blanket? Can I help you? Because as he usually does, I couldn't go in because the pandemic was on. I just dropped her off. And Matthew is, I think he's 6'4" or 6'5". He's a big guy, tall. And he put his hand on her back like he always does, and was going to get her blanket. And I remember she phoned me and she said she thought when Maddie left the room, she thought that he'd come back right away because she felt the hand on her back and her sense of presence, somebody was there. She looked around and no one was there. Maddie wasn't there. What happened was the Holy Spirit was telling her, at her darkest hour, when she was going through the worst stuff, don't worry, I'm with you. You'll be okay. And when she testified in our church, she testified about having perfect peace. And as a mom, I can tell you, I didn't have perfect peace. So I can remember going to her door one day, and actually I had a bad feeling about things, so I rushed in. I was taking her temperature and all these things. She was thinking, oh my gosh, and she's just trying to sleep. But it turned out she needed to see the doctor right away. So that was guidance there. So on the human trafficking issue, God provides. I'm 75 years old, and I'm here today. But most of you understand that it doesn't matter what your age is. You are called to do what you're supposed to do, right? So get used to me. I'm going to be around for a very long time, you guys. Now, the fact of the matter is I got the second surprise when Caitlin, who graduated university, came to me and said, Grandma, she was going to go into police work like her uncle was in police force. So she said, you know what, I just feel like I'm called to do the foundation and work with the foundation. So welcome our new CEO and our program director, Caitlin. You'll hear from them a little later. So we're going to go through what human trafficking is and what we can do to curtail it. Now, the first thing I want to talk to you about is something you probably don't want to hear. Remember when I told you that 93% of our cases came out of the Christian community? Every church should have a vetting system for anyone who volunteers with children. And I was so pleased to hear that Bethel had that. Yeah, clap. I mean, you should. I have to tell you, background checks, I have one guy who's been working in the church for years. And it was kept secret, but he abused a young boy, and, well, several young boys, to be honest. And he was a pillar in a church in Winnipeg. But you know what? He was convicted. And then after that, everybody just kind of forgot. Today, he's still working in churches all over the place. There's no vetting system for him, and people forget. And in some communities, people say, oh, well, he's sorry. God forgives. I'm sorry. I believe God forgives, but I don't buy that you don't do vetting in a church or any place else, a school. Do that vetting. You know, you need to have, you know, people need to sign volunteer forms. They need to be trained. They need to go through the background checks, and they need to have references. Now, the only thing is often people who've worked with children for years, like my husband and I are both teachers, we would kind of be offended by that because we say, well, people know us. Well, the fact of the matter is, no, you don't. Nobody's going to advertise their criminal record. So every church I'm encouraging, and I'm so pleased to hear that Bethel has that process in place. You know what? You're going to save a life. And you think it's not going to happen, but it's going to happen. So thank you for doing that. God bless you for doing that. Please encourage all churches to do that. All schools, all churches, all daycares. You have some daycares who don't do it. So I'm really encouraging that just for the safety of our children. So thank you for doing that here in Bethel. So let's talk about the human trafficking. You know, human trafficking happens anywhere. We're going to go through these slides very, very fast. What is human trafficking? It's the luring of children. The average age of entry into the sex trade is 12 to 14 years of age here in Canada. How do I know that? I passed the laws and I worked with CSIS, and that was in our documentation. And if you've ever passed laws, you go through first reading, second reading, third reading, you go through every Senate, every parliamentary committee. And so, you know, it's really important to know that human trafficking happens every day and they prey on the very young. And how they come across is not in a scary way. They come across in a very nice way, because traffickers like their victims to believe that they're their friends. They like them to believe that, you know, they can trust them, they can talk to them. And in families where, you know, it just doesn't happen to kids on the street. Mostly it doesn't happen to kids on the street. The kids on the street are the ones that were trafficked and who are disposed by the traffickers. They're addicted and then they belong on the street. But there's very few, mostly the victims of human trafficking are found in very good families. Very good families. You know, our foundation has been working with Peter Nygaard's victims. And I have to say, their lives are changed forever. A lot of them are just devastated about what happened. And, you know, Peter Nygaard grew up in, I think it was Deloraine, wasn't it? Someplace close to here. And he was a great clothing mongrel. He had fashion shows all over the world. But you've heard about him on the news. Who's heard about him on the news? I wish you could hear the victims' stories. Oh my gosh. Their lives are changed forever. So human trafficking happens everywhere. So how do you spot a predator? I can go through the numbers, but I've already done some of that. But you know, you can't spot a predator very easily because the predators come on as the children's friends. They get their trust. They travel everywhere. I've had human traffickers that hung out at malls watching the kids. I've had them come to churches and get part of groups, to sports events. It happens all over. We were working with one little girl this summer, Jet. She was 14 years old. She was telling us she was going to Toronto to be a prostitute. She was going to live in a great big house. And gangs, she was connected to a gang. All gangs traffic. All gangs human traffic. And also entrepreneurs human traffic. You can have groups of 2 or 3 or 1. A man named Kapangi was the first trafficker that was convicted in Canada. And of course, he had 3, and nobody knew or even suspected someone like him. Having said that, so the predators use a lot of different tactics to get their victims of human trafficking. And mostly it's the grooming traffic. And the grooming is this. On TV, you often see kids who are, you know, how should I put it? You see the traffickers going after kids that are just on the outskirts of society. That's not necessarily the case. We have found that a lot of newcomers to Canada, a lot of people like that are particularly targeted. But we have also found out, and that in indigenous community as well, but predators come on to their victims in a very friendly way. They get to know them. And during the pandemic, we had, I'll give you an example, we had a 13-year-old girl who was on the internet. And I have to say, she struck up a conversation with this cute young guy. He was 16 years old, and he sent her his picture. She didn't know that was not him. She thought she was talking to a 16-year-old boy. It turned out that the 16-year-old boy had the same interests she had in soccer, same interests in, you know, when they got through school, you know, they're going to go to university, and they had quite a conversation. And she was very attracted to this very young guy. And so during the pandemic, this 13-year-old girl had 2 other friends, and they started sort of a chat group. And 2 other young boys were introduced, and they were pretty cute too. And they had, you know, they had this real connection. They thought they were in love. Well, the boyfriend, over virtual boyfriend, they decided that they were girlfriend and boyfriend without really physically meeting each other. It was just over the internet. This boyfriend said, hey, let's meet up in the park. And so she agreed to meet him at a certain place at a certain time. And he asked her to bring her two friends because all the guys and gals would get together, you know, and they'd just hang out at the park. When the three girls got to the park, there were three older men in their latter 20s and early 30s, and those girls were taken to a motel where they serviced men sexually for 2 nights. And then they were taken back home, and they were threatened. They said, "We will be watching you. You don't tell your parents. You don't do anything." And they gave them another phone, a burner phone, to keep track of their movements. And so these girls lived like this for about 3 or 4 months. I'd have to look at the file to see how long it was now. But then one of the girls called our office, and that situation was interrupted. But those girls are still in counseling today. So, you know, luring can happen over the internet, and Kate will tell you a little bit more about that a little later. But it's one-to-one too. And predators hang out where the kids are. And they don't come on as their enemies, they come on as their friends. But after they get them, and after they're under their control, because the predators like to separate them from their families. They separate them from their families, they're often trafficked to other provinces. I could tell you a million stories. We don't have time this morning to do that. But it's so easy. And research is showing now that a young kid can be lured over the internet in 45 minutes. So, you know, when police forces like CSIS and others do this research, it's pretty alarming. So, you know, be very, very careful about social media. And watch for signs that your kid is being groomed. Now, often you'll see the girl fall in love with the boy and attitudes change. They come in late. They have a different kind of conversation. They drop all their old friends. And if they have two phones, let that be a real red flag, because traffickers always give them a phone so they can track them. If they come in with jewelry that they can't afford or clothes they can't afford, and they tell you, "Oh, I work at A&W, or I work at wherever," and they say they're buying those clothes, well, young kids cannot buy designer clothes. It doesn't matter if they work jobs or whatever. Usually kids normally have that extra spending money to, you know, save up, to do things, go on a trip, whatever they want to do. But when you see all these factors coming in, those are red flags to parents and to grandparents. And to make sure that you're very aware of how the child is acting. I have to say the change in attitude in school, the grades that are dropping, when they drop all their old friends, because kids going through school generally have the same friends. They might drop 1 or 2 of them, but I know I had a friend, Ruth Reimer, and to this day she's still my best friend. When I was growing up, she's in BC and I'm in Manitoba, but she's still my best friend because you have that connection. And a lot of kids keep their friends. I mean, not every one of them, and they make new friends, but when you see a complete shift where they won't have anything to do with their old friends, but they have this group of new friends and you don't exactly know who they are, that is a red flag. So there's many laws now that have been passed to support. I want you to watch this. Now I'm going to ask Janet, we're just going to go maybe 5 minutes overtime, but I'm going to ask Janet to come up and talk about something we started in Winnipeg called the National Human Trafficking Education Center. And so if you could come up, could you welcome her up as she's talking? Yes, and before she does that, Kate is going to talk a little bit about the social media.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here today. I get the pleasure of talking to you just briefly a little bit about social media and the impact that that is having currently right now on our youth and specifically within the world of human trafficking. As you know, throughout the pandemic, our lives have changed in more ways than one. And our current state is many of us are still working virtually. Our students are learning how to work online virtually in their classrooms. Everyone has a smartphone, a laptop, and traffickers have also learned to adapt to these things. And they have actually, it's one of the most tragic things throughout this whole thing, I think, is just how our world has changed in a lot of ways, and because of this, the traffickers are taking advantage of these youth online. One of the things that I like to say is, if you have kids, if you have grandkids, talk to them about what they're using online, the apps that they're on, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook. Traffickers are using all of these platforms, and they're using them to connect to our youth every single day. There are platforms today that can change the way somebody looks and sounds. The traffickers will conceal their identities, so they are appearing to be in similar age to these youth that they are reaching out to, and that's exactly how they do it. There was a study done down in the States, and it's a software company that works with artificial intelligence to try and find predators online. And so what they actually did was they created a fake persona of a 13-year-old girl. And they created an Instagram account for her, made her seem believable, made her seem real. And within 1 minute of them putting this account live online, there were predators reaching out to this account. They made it very obvious that this girl was 13 years old. They put it right in the profile. They put her grade. They made her image look as though she was a 13-year-old child. And within minutes of this being up, predators were reaching out to her online. It's something that happens every single day. Our youth need to be taught safe practices online. Talk with your kids. I'm sure many of you do, but talk to them about keeping their identity to themselves, not giving out their passwords, their real names, where they go to school, where they go to church. Let them know never to meet up with anyone that they have met online, because it's so unfortunate, but it does happen, and youth are so easily manipulated, unfortunately. They are so young and they are so naive, and so we need to be working to protect them. So that's, I guess, just the quick little rundown of our social media, but I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Definitely the online spaces have created a new opportunity for predators to connect with our youth, and one of the things we always tell them as well is really teach your children never to accept somebody as a friend that they don't know into their social channels either, because that tends to be a thing where people pay attention to, how many, connections and stuff like that you have. And just like we would never invite a stranger into our home, we never want to invite a stranger into our social media, because that does create the opportunity for what Caitlin touched on with respect to these predators connecting in less than a minute on this 13-year-old profile. So I just want to touch really quickly we could be here with you. Pardon me as I throw things around. But we could be here with you a very long time talking about many of the stories and trying to give you knowledge and information about the issue of human trafficking. But what we would like to do today with the short time that we have is make sure to equip you. Hopefully for some of you, you may be familiar with this already. For others, it might be an introduction. But regardless of where you're at with your knowledge and awareness of human trafficking, we want to equip you with as much as we can in terms of resources, and we do all of this for free. We look to raise our funds in other ways, but our belief is that every single Canadian needs to have this information for free so that they can be educated and protect. And it really does, it takes a nation. And so we need the entire community to have this awareness and be able to do something about it. And we work with community members, we work with law enforcement, we work with judges. We bring this education across many different areas of people that might interact on the issue. But today, I want to just expand a little bit on the National Human Trafficking Education Center that my mom touched on. We launched this officially in October of last year, and it kind of started out as an opportunity for us to be able to provide our information and make it more accessible in a self-guided virtual kind of way, but it's really grown and expanded from that as well. So I would invite you as a resource to go to our website, joycesmithfoundation.com, and go on to the National Human Trafficking Education Center. And if you continue to follow us, we go and see what parents need to know about human trafficking. It'll build on some of the things that we've talked about today, but it will also continue to grow and expand so you can continue to have new resources and material that will take you through some of the online safety. We have about 5 modules, one of which is a module for youth that would be great for your kids to sit and watch. So it's been developed and it's being produced from the perspective that a young one could watch it. So we have lots of new material coming online, so we hope that you'll visit us online to watch that. And again, to come visit us at the table at the back before you go. We have that Bible study. I think you'll get a lot out of that information as well. We can make that available to you. So I'll just play this really quickly for you and we'll wrap up here. Human trafficking is a very real and urgent problem that's happening to our Canadian youth at an alarming rate.
The average age of entry into the sex trade here in Canada is 12 to 14 years of age.
This crime happens in every community across Canada. All too often, young, innocent victims are lured by traffickers and their lives are changed forever. The launch of the National Human Trafficking Education Center represents a watershed moment towards achieving our vision to reach families across Canada and give them the knowledge that their families can be protected from human traffickers.
It's a game changer because
The launch of
any
the National
Canadian
Human
citizen
Trafficking
can find
Education
prevention
Center
programs
represents a
and
watershed moment
intervention
towards
programs.
achieving our vision. Our goal is to make prevention information more accessible and readily available to every Canadian.
Education is our greatest weapon to combat human trafficking, so please join us in the fight to stop human trafficking and intervention programs.
Our goal is to make prevention information more accessible and readily available.
Wonderful.
to every
And
Canadian.
Mom, if you
Education
want
is
to
our
come
greatest
back up and maybe wrap us up, I think we're coming up on 11:30, so we've touched on this. And the Education Center, and Caitlin is doing amazing work from a programming standpoint with our youth. There's a resource she's developed online. That's something else that you can access for parents, and there's a resource there for high school students too, with good knowledge for them. So leave it with you to wrap up.
Just stay here, you guys. I have to tell you that when you talk about the reason why we do this, turn to Proverbs 31, 8-9, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. For the rights of all who are destitute, speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And the needy can often be not poor, but needy because they need the support. We have the Joy in Action. They named, the fundraiser that. I don't get any say in anything. But having said that, all your donations are gratefully accepted. I work for free every day of my life. But we have to get all this out all across the country. And I'm so grateful to Janet. She's the brainchild of all this stuff. And for Kate, who's done amazing work with students and empowering students to have their armor against these traffickers who would do them harm. So pray for us, and God bless this church and its ministry as you go forward. And